We are pleased to welcome Ms. Kira Blackwell, Program Executive in the Office of the Chief Technologist, who has helped to assemble a terrific panel. Ms. Blackwell, we look forward to your discussions.
Thank you. I don't know if I have to, can you hear me? Oh, perfect, thank you. And what she didn't say is I have the best job ever, because I have the opportunity to actually go and look for technologies that have a commercial application and identify ways in which that technology can be spun in to help NASA solve some of its challenges. There's lots of technologies out there that I'm aware of, and you're going to get to hear from some of the people that we started a program with today, some of the technologies that they're developing, the commercial market they're actually working on developing the technology for, and how it could potentially work for solving some of NASA's challenges. It's a unique way to approach things, and I have a great opportunity to highlight it. I'm going to play a video that'll kind of give you an idea of what that program is, and then I'll kick it off to one of our chief technologists. So if you could cue the video.
As humans rush to explore new reaches of the solar system, a new set of challenges awaits both NASA and American industry.
These challenges represent not obstacles, but opportunities for innovative ideas from people of all walks of life to help advance the future of space exploration. Managed by the National Institute of Aerospace in Hampton, Virginia, NASA iTech is designed to help address gaps in technologies needed for future space exploration. A collaborative effort with universities, industry, and the public, iTech provides an opportunity for industry investors, government agencies, and small businesses to collaborate with innovators to further develop the solutions presented for both NASA and commercial applications. After putting out the call for white papers for iTech's Cycle 1, NASA received entries from 24 states across the U.S. After a panel of experts narrowed down the innovations to 25 semifinalists, then on down to 10 finalists, representatives from the top teams traveled to NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. to showcase their solutions to NASA, other space industry business leaders, and potential investors at the NASA iTech Forum. After final presentations and roundtable meetings with each finalist, the top 3 innovations were identified at the forum and recognized for their technical viability, the likely impact on space exploration, and the potential for commercialization. The top 3 teams selected for Cycle 1 were Aequor, Inomed, and Liberty Biosecurity. Aequor, from Oceanside, California, has synthesized more than 40 chemicals that prevent the ability of bacteria to form a glue-like substance called biofilm. Biofilm threatens both the health of astronaut crews and skews sensor readings by building up in the water systems and on optical sensors of spacecraft in zero gravity. Preventing biofilm is a critical advancement in life support and sensor technology. Inomed, from Anaheim, California, is developing a home blood testing device called HealthScale. It gives patients the ability to monitor major health indicators, then send the results remotely to a doctor. This has great potential for monitoring the health of future space crews who will be operating far from medical teams for long periods of time. Liberty Biosecurity is tackling the problem of DNA damage from radiation by increasing a cell's ability to protect the body from radiation. This innovation could drastically reduce the costs associated with long-duration space missions by changing the needs for heavy spacecraft radiation shielding. As part of the forum, each of the top 10 innovators had the opportunity to discuss their groundbreaking ideas with NASA leadership as well as industry experts to explore new technology development partnerships with the goal of commercializing these products into the American aerospace industry. The top 3 entries were also awarded additional mentoring from iTech and are all moving their innovative ideas forward, bringing us one step closer in addressing the gaps in technologies needed for future space exploration. With the success of the iTech Forum, the second cycle of NASA iTech was opened in early 2017 as a new set of challenges and opportunities for innovators were issued to help advance human spaceflight far into the future.
I think that sums up what iTech is. And I would like to hand it off to Peter. Peter's one of our chief technologists, and he's going to kind of give you a little background on himself, and then I'll ask him a few questions that might help you better understand the process and how it works.
Well, thank you, Kira. It's an honor to be here and being part of this iTech team. So I'm the Chief Technologist at Goddard Space Flight Center. I have responsibility to oversee our internal research and development and help play a role in integrating our portfolio across the center and with other centers and for the agency with the mission directorates. I was really pleased to be part of this process and this new initiative that Kira set up within about the last 18 months, because it just adds to a new tool to our toolbox to how we could identify new technologies from non-traditional sources. What Kira and her team did is they identified 4 main focus areas that are important to our exploration, and we received a very large number of proposals. They were down-selected by a panel of experts, and then the final set of portfolios, she brought in the center chief technologists, and we prioritized them for ultimately a final review after some mentoring with these technologists. Very fun, exciting process, just an example of how NASA is trying to improve how it innovates.
So Peter, I've sat on panels and I've received some feedback that sometimes the process of submitting a proposal is pretty cumbersome. You guys have a simple process, and can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about iTech is it's really simple to get involved. It's a simple 5-page white paper, no real structure in that. But of course, the technologist has to identify what the unique challenges they're addressing, what their unique approach is, and why they're qualified to go forward with this. And then through some of the mentoring that we were able to offer through the panels and other people that are brought in by iTech, including people in the VC community, we're able to sharpen their offering and make sure that it is focused on the right things and we're selling it for the right reasons.
And so with that 5-page submission, do you find that the technologies, be careful because you're sitting next to all of the entrepreneurs, but do you think it was the quality of proposals you got were something that actually NASA would be interested in?
Yeah, we were really pleased to see such a high degree of quality from all these proposals. You know, I review hundreds of proposals in a year, and I see a lot of really innovative ideas. But what I saw, what they were bringing in some really cutting-edge research and applying it in such a way that is really going to be providing new capabilities as we go beyond this planet to explore deeper in space.
Okay, so because I work for NASA, I know we have programs that actually we already fund early stage development technologies. Why one more program?
Well, again, as I mentioned before, it's reaching out to alternative technology sources. We have some great new programs in the new STMD, Space Technology Mission Directorate, for NSTRF, NASA Space Technology Research Grants and Fellows. Very successful. We have hundreds of that engaging both students and early career professors for some of our most challenging problems. But often that is the community that we typically tap into. What I really like about iTech is we're reaching out to these type of technologists who are doing stuff that may be ancillary to us, but are going to be addressing our long-term needs.
Is there an issue with IP?
Another beauty of this program is that the PI, the principal investigator, the proposing organization retains all IP, which is unlike what happens in most of our technology development, where we usually get some type of a stake in that or ownership.
Does NASA give funding?
There's no funding conveyed to these awardees. What they get is they get connected to advisors and mentors. They get connected to people to help sharpen it, but they get a lot of visibility, and you'll hear through some of the other speakers here what that visibility buys them.
As a chief technologist for the agency representing a field center, from your perspective, what's the benefit that you provide by looking at the technologies to your own center or to the agency?
I could put it in the right scope and make sure that it's in the eyes and under the people who can make the most benefit of the technology, and give feedback to these technologists so that they could carry forward with a commercial offering or advance their research to a stage that ultimately can benefit both them for their commercial offering and for us, the agency, for our applications.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to actually ask some questions to David Sinclair. He's one of the entrepreneurs that we were able to work with. And if you will cue that next video.
All right. So for many decades, scientists have known that as we get older, we lose our capacity to repair DNA. And this leads to cancer and overall aging and deterioration. In this new study, we've discovered what we think is a main mechanism that controls this process, and even, we think, some ways to reverse it. What we've discovered specifically is that when we're young, there's a protein that repairs our DNA efficiently. But as we get older, there's another protein that sticks to it, and that stops it from working. In one experiment, we fed old mice, the equivalent of about an 80-year-old human, a molecule called NMN, which then the mice turned into another molecule called NAD. Now, NAD is essential for life, and what we found out is that when you add it to the mouse's diet, it pops these two proteins apart, and this protein can now be as active as it was in a young mouse and restore our youthful levels of DNA repair. Effectively, this restored the DNA capacity of the old mice back to that of a young mouse, and also removed the DNA damage that was accumulating in their tissues. In another experiment, we exposed the mice to radiation, and our treatment greatly improved their DNA repair capacity and lessened the effects of the radiation exposure. We're particularly excited about doing a human trial over the next few months and seeing if these results translate to people.
So Dr. Sinclair, can you tell me a little bit about the work you've been doing in this area?
Sure. Well, thanks, Kira, for inviting myself and my colleagues here today. So just very briefly, so I'm a professor at Harvard Medical School, and I'm also the chief scientist at Liberty Biosecurity. Some cleared and non-cleared members of the company are here today if anyone's interested in following up. My role as chief scientist is that I look at across broadly our organization, which has about 100 PhDs and MDs, and our goal is to do the best life science work this country has ever seen. The work that you just mentioned that was on the video was 6 years of work within my lab and also within Liberty of trying to figure out why our bodies are not efficient at repairing DNA. And we were actually referred to the iTech competition by Fort Detrick, by the military. They said, hey, check out this competition. It wasn't very hard to apply, so we did it. And actually, we have really benefited. We have loved the mentorship. We've loved meeting the people at NASA. And we now have a space program at Liberty. And we weren't considering going in that direction. We were thinking of going for cancer or other rare diseases. But now we are very excited about being able to work with NASA and allow people to get outside of Earth's atmosphere and do that safely.
So are you really 200 years old? Just kidding. Just kidding, just kidding. But how do I start taking it?
Yeah, we had a little bit of press recently. Some of you may have seen it. The work was just published in Science magazine last week, a week before. And so my inbox has about 3,000 people that you have to get in line with.
Wait, shouldn't I be able to get before the 3,000 people that don't know you?
We can work out a deal. But quite seriously, this is a molecule that is the product of 20 years of research that my lab and the field of aging research has been working on. And we actually now know that our bodies are very efficient at repairing themselves. We know that if we exercise and if we diet, or have a very lean diet, our bodies can repair themselves efficiently. That goes down over time. This molecule called NAD that we boost with our drug, that goes down about half levels by the time you're 50. You can exercise, but that'll only keep it slightly above where it would naturally go. So we boost the body's natural defenses against deterioration. One of those is, one of the outcomes is you get better DNA repair, but there are many other things that actually occur. So there are other benefits besides just protecting the body against radiation as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about what those benefits would be?
Yeah, so the first trial, as was said in the video, we plan on doing that in the next few months. We've submitted protocols and we're hoping to have permission to go into people in the next few months, and that'll be done in Boston. That'll be a safety study, but we hope to very quickly go into further phase 2, phase 3 studies as well. The other benefits that we're looking at in the people is it's not just DNA repair. What we find is, at least in the mouse studies that we've done over the last few years, is that elderly mice become young within about a week in terms of their liver and their muscle. They can run further. They even have better cognitive capacity, lower inflammation, all the types of things that astronauts will experience on a journey to Mars and back, and it's really quite deleterious. It's equivalent of having a CT scan every few days. We find that in our mice we can prevent that. And if it translates into humans, it's going to be a real inexpensive way to protect the astronauts rather than putting 10 feet of water around the spacecraft.
So what made you apply for iTech?
Well, we're all excited about space in our organization. We dream of doing stuff like this, but never had the opportunity. So we jumped at the chance, and we really can't believe that our childhood dreams are coming true so far. So we're also very patriotic. We want the US to do well in their space program. So that's the other reason we applied.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next panel member, Marilyn. Do you want to cue the slides for Marilyn?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing.
So Aequor means the sea in Latin. And what we did was look to nature to solve a big problem. And the problem is called bacterial contamination. And we found nature's remedy from inhibiting the ability of bacteria to form on surfaces in contact with water. And this bacterial control is new, it's a new approach, and it is hopefully going to disrupt the $600 billion biocide market, biocides being those toxic chemicals that are antimicrobial, antiseptic, anti-fouling, pesticides, and so forth. So in the ocean, inspired by that picture, why is it that barnacles, mussels, and algae are not adhering to all of those surfaces? And so Aequor's founder collected surface slimes, if you will, and discovered 17 novel marine microbes, which she named. And those microbes, these little marine bacteria, produce hundreds of chemicals. So the next 10 years was spent screening the chemicals, determining which ones were best as antibiofilm agents, and which ones could be then scaled up or synthesized, because they're made in teeny quantities. And we hired brilliant chemists who were able to synthesize the chemicals, and now we have over 40 novel and existing structural analogs of these derivatives. And they are being earmarked for consumer, industrial, marine, and medical applications. Because it turns out that all bacteria are the same. And they land on surfaces, talk to each other, and form biofilm, which is the shield. And when we learned that biofilm forms thicker and more virulently in space, that's when we thought, let's see if we can find a program to test our molecules in this harsh exoplanet environment. And thanks to Kira and the organizers of the INET competition, we're here today. Cynthia Brazel is the brilliant scientist who made the discovery. All I do is write the checks and raise them and put together the pieces of the business side of the puzzle to show the market validation. We have a lot of companies wanting to work with us. We are a woman-certified, woman-owned small business. We're winning a lot of grants. NIH, National Institutes of Health, will be testing 4 of our molecules against the superbugs, all of which are biofilm formers. And much like on Earth, their biofilm structure is much thicker and different. DOD is interested in testing 5 of our molecules against the biothreats, anthrax, botulism, which are also, not coincidentally, all biofilm formers. And in fact, every pandemic threat and urgent threat as well is a biofilm forming bacteria. So here we are, join us. We're located in, our lab is in the Janssen lab at J&J in La Jolla, and we are in Oceanside, California.
So I'm going to tell on Marilyn for a moment, because that brilliant scientist is also your daughter.
She is. She is.
So
she's brilliant, but
she is brilliant. But I think it's a pretty great thing that a mom and daughter are doing this together. But how did a scuba diving trip with your daughter put you on a different trajectory?
Well, she's a dive master, and I love diving as well. You know, I go under the water and I look at the fishies and the bubbles and the colors. She goes under the water, and as a Ph.D. microbiologist, is trying to figure out what is it in that picture that inhibits fouling on all those surfaces. So her going backwards from discovery to find nature's solution and then figure out what it is her approach. And it turned out to be very, very successful.
You guys have identified molecules that you believe can eliminate the biofilm that develops in the water filtration systems in space, as well as develops on our lenses in space, our sensors. So my question to you is, where are you now with that process since you've been through iTech? And keep in mind, iTech, guys, happened in December. Just to put a frame around how long it's taken. The top 10 actually presented in the first week in December. And so when they give you an update on where they are, you'll have an idea of how quickly things are moving. So if you can let me know.
Yes, definitely. So a few years ago, I had attended the ISS R&D conference because I had read that biofilm was forming so thickly on satellite optical sensors that it was skewing the readings. That's pretty shocking. So biofilm, it's rare to see the word in print to begin with, but this was a need. And then when we further found out that the water supply was contaminated with a biofilm forming bacteria, and that every astronaut was returning to Earth with a biofilm infection, I had the great honor of meeting at Goddard Johnson Space Flight Center, Julia Robinson, who made the statement, biofilm after radiation. Biofilm is the #1 impediment to long-duration manned space travel because of this contamination in the water system, which is a life support fundamental element. So we had contacted the Marshall Space Flight Center, and were delighted when they said they would sponsor a simulated test on Earth to see if our molecule works in water, and here it is in a simulation. So I'm now sanitizing my hand completely, and here it is in powder that you can reconstitute easily in water. And so our first thought was, let us just put X amount of powder in their system and see if it works. And that's the stage we're at. We're now running the tests.
So currently, since December, you've moved into Johnson & Johnson Incubation Center.
Yes.
One conversation I had with you said that you guys had signed a licensing deal and may have a product on the market within a year.
Yes. So since these are non-toxic green chemicals, which has a lot of cachet in the consumer products industry, as there are bans and people moving away from toxic biocides in our soaps and cleaning products, we were approached by a green consumer products company and are now in the stage of formulating, really like mad scientist, let's throw more of this in, let's throw more of that in.
The solution.
And we have so many chemicals, they're just throwing 7 or 8 of them in together alone, and doing different tests. And the validation testing is being done by USDA. And hopefully we'll have a new consumer product by the end of this year.
That's pretty awesome. And you're also having conversations with Marshall about testing it in their water filtration system.
So yes, they're building a simulator, which is not inexpensive or easy to do, because this is the water system that captures all liquid from the ISS, specifically that it means sweat, urine, soapy water. It's passed through a series of filtration systems, and along the way it is clogged with biofilm. And so we are hoping to do this beta test on Earth and then do an on-orbit test as well.
I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So the last entrepreneur that we're going to talk to today is Anoop, and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you were introduced to iTech.
Yes, so at Inamed, we're developing a connected home blood testing device for monitoring chronically ill patients. So everyone's been in the unfortunate situation of having a family member or themselves being hospitalized, whether it's to the ER or just, to the hospital for some duration of time. And so, that's a traumatic experience, not only for you, but also for the family. And so what we want to do is try and reduce that burden by, after patients are discharged, having a good means of monitoring them. So our first focus area outside of space is with heart failure patients. So about 25% of heart failure patients get readmitted to the hospital after discharge within a month, and within 6 months, over half of them do. So not only is this a big emotional burden and can scare people into not even doing exercise because they're worried about their heart rate going too high, but also it's a strong financial burden to the healthcare system. And so what we're doing is creating this device to allow for the early detection of deterioration after patients are discharged. So we found out about iTech actually at a startup competition called Tech.co, where we met with Tom and Kira, and they suggested we apply. We had never really thought about our device being applied to space, let alone potentially the Mars mission. And so, but it was something that all of us were fascinated about space, given our science background, and so we decided to. What? Yeah, yeah. So we applied, and we were lucky to make it to headquarters to be able to present. And so it's really exciting to think that our device can not only have such a great impact on Earth, but also with the Mars mission and some of these longer missions where you need to be monitoring your health, and you're not going to have a whole central laboratory like you do at hospitals.
So in my career, I've done a lot of things, but at 22, which is how old you are, I probably had not done the things that you've done, and so I've been very impressed. But can you show us your prototype?
So this is our prototype. We actually in the beginning of December, we actually didn't have this made yet. It was still a proof of concept stage, but throughout the past 4 months or so, we've made a lot of progress. We most recently, we moved to Silicon Valley. We just a week and a half ago graduated from Y Combinator's accelerator program, and now we're looking to continue development. Sort of the next steps are finish up turning this into something a little less prototype-y, and then starting clinical trials later this year with a number of the hospital systems which we have agreements in place with.
So can you sort of demonstrate a little bit how
it
works?
So how it would work, basically this is the testing cartridge, and then this is the microneedle. So a lot of people don't like doing finger sticks. This microneedle allows you to draw blood painlessly, which is pretty nice. And then what you do is, once this is, you put this on here and slot the whole testing card into this area. And so what this does is then there's hardware in the back end which will read the signal from the biosensors and being able to measure the concentration of each of the different analytes in parallel. And the important part about this is a lot of chronically ill patients have multiple conditions, comorbidities, and so being able to manage not only their primary diagnosis but also the other conditions which can often cause them to go to the hospital is what we're trying to allow with our disease management solution.
And percentage of accuracy of the data?
Yeah. So right now we're at a 15% coefficient of variation. That's sort of the terminology they use. We're trying to get that down to 10% before we start our clinical trials, and we're already on pace to be able to do that by the end of this year.
And so being a part of iTech and actually being accepted into Y Combinator, do you think that there was a connection between the two?
I think so. I mean, I think being, more open to looking at different areas beyond just, so initially we started as a consumer-facing product, but slowly we realized that the type of impact we want to have is more on the people who really need it most, those who are chronically ill, those who really suffer because they have to go to the doctor so frequently. And not only is that a burden on them, but also on their family. And so I think iTech sort of opened our eyes to different other areas we could be exploring. And one other really awesome thing about iTech was meeting all the other teams. So not only these people on stage, but also one of the other teams in particular from Penn State had developed this omniphobic coating to be used for many different things. But one in particular that we're using it for is for allowing our blood sample to flow with zero power, which allows us to eliminate the need for pumps and things that you would be using in the lab but couldn't really use easily at home.
So that was one of the top 10
yes,
participants that actually presented. And so while Inamed was also there, they noticed, wow, this might actually work for something that we're doing. Were there other synergies, or have there been other synergies with?
Yeah. So I mean, with David here, we last night at our event at the Golden Bee. I'll leave it as event. But we.
Hey, wait! This is Vegas. Goodness.
Yeah. So we were discussing, both of our, ideas of how sort of the future of medicine can be. David, obviously, being a very experienced scientist and entrepreneur, me just sort of getting in this area was really helpful, but also seeing, the vision of how you could have, something, 5 years from now, a device like this at home, do the test, and based on your results, a pill would get 3D printed, personalized to you, and get either sent to your home, or if you have a 3D printer for pills at home, printed there, and you would be able to do that to really, monitor your health and practice preventive medicine, which is really the most important thing to reduce healthcare costs. If we can prevent people from getting sick earlier on, that's, that's the ultimate goal.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
You can't have entrepreneurs developing cutting-edge technologies without actually having investors. One of the things that iTech does is it brings in the room executives, contractors. It's open for contractors to come in. My hope is, since we don't provide funding for them, that either investors that are interested in investing in early stage technologies would actually pick that up as they see it and help move the technology forward. In the event that NASA's interested in it in the next 5 years, we could either license it or purchase it. And we're not making the early stage seed funding, we're not putting that into it, whereas some of the companies or investors are. With it already having, with all of the technologies, part of the requirement is that they have a commercial market, which is really important. So I'd like for us to hear from some investors. So I'm actually going to go to the end and go to Riccardo first. And so as an investor, why would you be interested in investing in space? I mean, I'm just going to lay it out there. The return on the investment probably isn't as quick as it is for every other market. So why space?
Yes, thank you, Kira. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say, thank you to NASA iTech and to Space Symposium for giving us the opportunity to share our stories and our experience. So I'm privileged to be a judge of the member committee of NASA iTech. So I've been lucky to not only to dissect the last 3 companies that you guys saw, but also many others. So the reason why space, I'm based out of Palo Alto. I'm a Silicon Valley guy. I'm what is called technically, I'm a venture capitalist. I do micro VC. Micro VC are the ones that are generally doing seeding round, pre-man evaluation, and our cut is between $100K to $500,000. This is generally the investment that we prioritize. You're right, space historically has been an area where private investor and commercial investor were a little bit shy.
I mean, unless you want to build a spacecraft.
Correct. So for basically 3 main reasons, right? I mean, number one, it used to be, and still is to some extent, extremely expensive, so high entry barriers. Number 2, used to be, and still is to some extent, highly regulated. And last but not least, number 3, very dangerous. People may die. So when you invest your own money, or you represent pension fund or university fund, there are other easier vertical or industry on planet Earth where you can have a return of 3x, 5x return in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
What happened over the last 5 years, I believe, 5 to 6 years, is that space industry has been under a huge disruption and a big shifting. I believe Silicon Valley and West Coast United States had a big, was a big engine behind that. Even today, although they're not startup, but they're managed like startup. You saw that Blue Origin and SpaceX are the ones that are pretty popular on the media, on space.
Twitter.
Correct, and advancement. So, and behind those two big names, you have a lot of other startups. You may, I'm sure you know Planet Labs, Bar Vector Space, and they're all based out in that 100 miles radius of Silicon Valley, of the Bay Area. Why? Because technology, which is my domain expertise, I'm not a space guy, became also at the forefront of the innovation of space exploration. If you take a company like Planet Labs, for example, of course they did a lot of innovation on satellite and a new set of satellite, but the intellectual property of that company is what? Software. And this is happening for any industry. If you ask Ford in the automotive, what's the future of Ford in the next 10 years? The answer is software, because every car will be a micro data center, a mobile micro data center. So the same is happening in this industry. And the industry attracts commercial company that, as you said before, Kira, they have an almost ready minimal viable product that can be commercialized and therefore can return money to the investor in a reasonable time frame. You know, one of the issues that every startup has generally, right? Not only in space, but in any industry, is that you build a startup based on what? Based on a vision. Every startup, right? Every entrepreneur is a visionary. It's someone that wants to change the world. And it doesn't mean the entire world, you know, maybe your own world, maybe space industry, or maybe healthcare, or automotive. But people don't buy vision. Nobody buys vision. No. People buy solution to problem they have today, and has to be tangible solutions. Then, of course, you got to have a vision, but you got to start with something. So I was pretty impressed because NASA iTech, all those companies, they have not only a minimal viable product, but they have actually a use case that is ready today and create or address a need. And those are all very good for the investment. Last but not least, as you saw, the last 3 startups or companies, I mean, no one of them is a traditional space or aerospace industry, which is a great sign because, you know, I think this industry for the last 30 years has been a kind of a stovepipes, a government predominantly driven business with a lot of rocket science, engineer, engine. You know, I went around, tried to see if there were any startup in the pavilion, and I was amazed about how many companies, and you know, it looks like a rocket has been sliced like a salami, and everyone is building something. I mean, they're building a bolt, or they're building a pipe, or right. So that's an amazing industry. But I think that what space needs and space colonization will need in the future are going to be more industry parallel industries that they can have an impact on the mission on Mars. Like if we're going to send astronauts on mission on Mars, we have to modify and give them a better DNA because they're going to be exposed to an environment very different from planet Earth. And we're going to have the issue of the water because ISS, as you heard before, I mean, you have that issue today. And the same for the way you monitoring your health. The good things about this is that once you fix this benefit for space industry, then you can reapply those use cases on this planet, and you can actually make money out of it. So that's the reason why there's been a growing interest.
So from an investor perspective, have you seen a benefit, a direct benefit for the startups? You and I had conversations, and you talked about that. Could you kind of elaborate a little bit?
Sure. Well, one of the, you know, a startup has many issues, right? I mean, I built a startup as well. I've been in technology for 22 years, but, and I think before to invest, you got to build a startup. So you know the right question. And you know, otherwise, it's like being a pilot and you never flew before. But doing a startup is like flying with a Cessna at night with 0 digital instrument. Everything is like a 1945 plane. And you don't know where you are, if you are flying through the ocean or on the Rocky Mountain, right? But one of the main issues that any startup has is awareness, right? How can you make sure that your addressable market, A, is aware of what you do, and B, they're sold in the way you do? So I think that what NASA has, among many, many things, probably, you know, thanks over the years to, you got some good friends in LA, in Hollywood, that built a great brand for you. I can't think about any other agency in the United States without being respectful for the other that has globally more allure and brand
I'm sorry, it's global.
Like NASA.
You can go to any country.
So I think what you provide to startup is an amazing sounding board. It's a validation area, which for startup are very important, absolutely, and a great springboard to create that awareness.
I agree with you. I think that it, so essentially you're saying that investors would be interested because not only the technology could be applicable to what we're doing in space, but also because it has a commercial market. So there's possibly a chance you might actually get a quicker return on your investment.
Totally. And I think, if I may, I think that the role you are playing, NASA iTech, which I think is a brilliant initiative for startup and entrepreneur, because you know, investor has the same issue of startup. How can you find the next Snapchat? How can you find the next Zuckerberg, right? Very hard. Silicon Valley is a little bit easier because we all are in one road, if you're familiar with a place called Sand Lane, right? So it's basically 3 miles where you have $100 billion of investment run every day. But I think the role that NASA high-tech has is an unbelievable catalyst to attract, for the reason I described before, of the brand and the capabilities, amazing technologies like the one you just saw, and then showcase them as a way to foster and to help those technology across the board. One of the initiatives that we were strategizing with Kira recently, you know, we want to organize a road show in Silicon Valley to the top 5, 6 venture capitalists, Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, Greylock, Lightspeed Venture. So to organize a road show where we're going to present NASA iTech.
So NASA can show Silicon Valley how it's done.
Yeah. Correct. And also making Silicon Valley a little bit more aware about what's going on in space industry.
Joke.
I think that the Valley is actually making giant steps. Recently, Lightspeed Venture organized a great event in Menlo Park, organizing a speed date between space entrepreneur, space startup, and investors. So there is a growing interest for all the reasons I said before. And I think the role of NASA is crucially important and key.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so now I'd sort of like to hear from one of the other investors that was there. And I think you have a little bit of a different perspective, but it's just as critical. And so, Jose, if you can just tell us a little bit about your background quickly, and then we'll go into some questions.
So first things first, I'm gonna throw a curveball here. First of all, I want to first thank the Space Foundation. Our company, Caelus Partners, has been around for about 12 months, and we started initially looking at biotech, and then we quickly transferred into the space industry. We'll talk about that. But Space Foundation and its corporate partners have been nothing but professional and incredibly helpful as we made that immediate transition with a lot of capital having to move on the fly. And then the second person I got to thank is Kira. And Kira, and I've been into a few of these panels, and I'll tell you right now how many panels you're going to have: the investor, the ULA, the NASA, CTO, and the entrepreneurs all on the same stage talking about a single outcome, which is about innovation. Yep. So Kira, if I get a hand of applause for Kira for her work, it's just, absolutely. I'm sorry, you are amazing. You really are. And as an investor, I know those words never mix, but humbly, thank you for all you're doing. And I say that tongue in cheek. So what Caelus Partners does is we're a consulting, advising, and investment group. We serve the entrepreneurs, we serve the investors, and we serve the government. And we have to go after all three in order to be able to manifest both the outcome of the technology as well as the financial strategy of these technologies that you're trying to pioneer and commercialize. So if you're not looking at all of it, then you leave one of those three legs out. We primarily focus from a strategic perspective, partly because of our background, and being able to understand it strategically on the front end, and whether the front end, that could be a startup or a senior company, a more mature company like ULA, looking to do a joint venture or any of those types, and look at that strategy first, so that as contracts are happening through the government, as investments are going through, is the financial going to get in the way of the technology, or is the technology going to get in the way of the finance, because the technology takes too long to adapt and overcome? So we sit at the nexus of that, and we start from anywhere between startups, again, to simple raises, small raises, to incredibly high raises for companies that are looking in joint ventures.
So, Jose, you and I had a conversation, and you talked about the significance of a space economy.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by it because I feel the very same way. Can you elaborate
absolutely.
a little bit on that?
So, to Caelus partners, space is a domain. It's not a market. We know that there's a market today, but we all understand that over time it will become a domain. No different than water, no different than cyber, no different than any land and any other domain that we operate in. Now, what we also understand is in order to create an economic engine in that domain, so that is, before you're going to make money, certain things have to be stabilized in a community before you get to that economic engine. So could I make a deal today and make it work to monetize for me and make the technology work? Yeah, sure, I could try, work really hard. But the bigger question for the industry is, what are the things we have to stabilize in terms of those functions or those attributes before you create an economic engine? So when I tell you about the strategy and the financial strategy, what I'm essentially telling you is, before the technology and all the other things that have to come together over the next 20, 30 years, the first thing we got to do is develop what is that framework that sets the sets of principles that allows us to build that economic engine. Somebody says, well, where did I get that? Case in point, Iraq or Afghanistan. That's my background is military, and spent a lot of time in foreign countries trying to build that economic engine. Well, you have to build stability principles regardless of what country you were in and where we operated as the U.S. military. So that is the genesis of that. We're so passionate about that because at the same time, so with that background as a look, when it comes to NASA iTech, we're not just looking at a piece of technology to make money. We're trying to see, is this a global impact? How does it compete in the nation-state competitions? How do we ensure that those companies in NASA become conduits to ensure that we are not just making money, but we're actually meeting all the other stability requirements that are necessary? So this is a topic, a pretty big topic. Caelus is taking that on. We have released a paper on this, as well as we're going to do a presentation on 21 May out in Seattle, where we're located. But that is what attracted me to NASA iTech when I saw them brief, and they were talking about this back in August in the other Space Foundation Forum down in California, and we said, that is the direction we want to be in. We want to help that, not just from a money perspective or government, but from a strategic point of how do we help the entire industry move forward, and this is a great forum.
Okay, so you spent 2 days at the iTech Forum, 2 days, and from an investor perspective, time is money.
It is.
So based on those 2 days, do you feel like it was a good use of your time?
My God, it was. Okay. So for those, some of us are in government, some of us are in investing, some of us are in the big market. To give you an idea of what it takes for somebody like Riccardo and I to find industry deals, align them up, and then figure out who's going to pay for them and how it all comes. If you're in the government, you look at the fiscal year cycles, you can work through that, you can work contracts. If you're us, you're trying to figure out where does this sit. And then you got to meet the technology, you got to get to know it. There's got to be some trust built there to then quickly bring another 3 or 4 people that are, or other people that are going to bring in investments in it. and then make sure that you stay with it. So to look at 10 companies, and Riccardo, I know you have your own methods, I have mine, but to actually do the due diligence to align these things in the different types of deals and joint ventures, that would take me and my team about 3.5, 4 months to just have the 10 companies, just identify them, get to know them a little bit, to have the opportunity to listen to their pitch. 15 minutes, that's unreal. That's like out of this world. And then sit down with them for 15 minutes. And then, by the way, the person sitting next to me was Peter. So now I have a top technologist sitting next to me who looks at it from the government side. I'm looking at it from the money side. And you have this entrepreneur trying to articulate the way he wants to go. So the mentoring that's happening in that environment is unbelievable. 6 figures type of service on a 3-way conversation. And because it is sitting with the government, a lot of it is discreet, it keeps quiet, and you don't have to deal much with it. So what an incredible win for everyone to learn and to grow and see those opportunities.
And there's also a contractor. There was a contractor,
right, there's a contractor
so
as well.
So Tory had a representative there, so ULA was there. So you have a contractor there that sits in and kind of engages as well. So one last question for you. Have you had, so since December, has there been any sort of movement with any of those top 10? And
Yes.
if you could share with us at least one.
Yeah, no, I'll share. So first things first. To give you and Riccardo, you can attest to this. The difference between the top 3 and the top 10, it was not a whole lot. Almost every single one, and Dennis, you were there. Yes. The global impact of each of these companies that they were in, or concepts, were unbelievable. So the answer is we contact all 10 of them. There was no one was left untouched. So I can legally say that.
Okay, wait, to his defense, I'll say that I had a contractor in the room who had decided that there were 3 companies they wanted to partner with. They they contacted us the following Monday, and they said that they would like to see the 15 that didn't make it in the top 10. So the chief technologist did a down select from 25 to 10. And so this major partner of ours that might start with the letter B, Boeing. They were smart enough to say these technologies were pretty amazing, and yes, not only would we like to partner with 3 because they could help us with the work that we're doing, but we'd like to see the 15 that you didn't select. So you guys laughed that he contacted all 10. Boeing wanted all 25.
And of course, in this cycle of how we do business on the investment side, usually it's quarterly. So a lot of the engagements are happening now to then start looking at the races in the following quarter. So we've touched on one, we have a few, about 2 or 3 of them, and then most likely we'll have 1 or 2 on the race on the back end. But to thank you again for everything you've done. And whether you're government, straight military, or NASA, if you're a contractor, I would say get involved in this because the sharing was, again, out of this world.
Beneficial.
Thank you again.
Okay, well, so I'd like to also state that what we're trying to do, we can't do it alone as the government. We can't do it alone, so we need investors, we need entrepreneurs, but we also can't do it without our contractors. And so I reached out to Tory, and I was fascinated at the fact that we're doing something very similar, actually, and so could you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's critical moving forward, is that it's not just a solution for just NASA, because we can't do it by ourselves, and I can't provide funding. But if these entrepreneurs can help you, it will inadvertently help us. And that's really what I'm trying to get at. So I'll
So I think you're talking about the cislunar marketplace.
Yes.
All right, so let me give you a little bit of context, and I'll talk about what that is.
Perfect.
Of course, we're United Launch Alliance. If you're not as familiar with us, we are the world's most prolific space launch provider. We have made the world a safer place, a more connected place. We have been to every planet in the solar system and beyond. We have flown 118 times. We've never lost a mission. We are America's ride to space. But now I am on a mission to see an expanded and permanent human presence beyond our planet. And the key to that future is a self-sustaining economy in the space between here and the moon that we call cislunar space. I'm going to build a railroad between here and the moon. It will attract space entrepreneurs who will put businesses there. There is a tremendous wealth of natural resources, a scant week's journey from where you sit in this very spot, that all these many decades have been unattainable by human beings. We sit here on this earth, toiling and struggling, often in strife, due to a shortage of resources, water, energy, precious materials, and yet right there, they reside in such abundance that it defies human imagination. The key that will unlock that is a flexible space transportation system. We are developing a new revolutionary upper stage, an upper stage that is refuelable, reusable, will never return to Earth, will create a fleet of space trucks that will comprise that railroad. And so it's not really about ULA. It's actually about the businesses that we will enable. And so we created something we called the Cislunar Marketplace. So we now have about 100 companies, space entrepreneurs, that have joined us in this community to come together and look for how that will work and to tell us the needs that they will have as I am developing that technology that will unlock this tremendous wealth. And so we had a couple of workshops. We've had one here. We had one at our place back in Centennial, just up the road. We brought people together, and it was kind of fun because it was a workshop. You know, we had them in tables, and we were sort of stepwising them through building business plans and identifying the things that they would need and the partnerships that would need to be formed. And it was just so cool because, you know, you get to that first step in the exercise and someone stands up and says, well, this is my business, and here's what I'm going to need. And then somebody at another table would leap up and go, well, that's my business. My business is to provide that for you. When we do this thing I have described, there will be a $3 trillion economy in cislunar space. There will be 1,000 men and women living and working in space because their jobs are in space. Because they've gone there for a better life, it will be a great democratization of space, and it will change everything here on Earth. Just imagine if precious metals are no longer expensive. The things we could design and build and construct, or ubiquitous energy that could be delivered anywhere on the surface of the planet. What will that do for humanity? That's what we are going to accomplish within the next 20 to 30 years. And I hope that you will all be a part of it. And for the next hour or so, by the way, I am your personal rocket scientist.
So, I mean, we've had a lot of shifts in our industry, and sometimes I've heard that there's sort of this culture where people get stuck where they don't really want to think innovatively because they have a job to do, it's a project, and they have a deadline, and they have X number of dollars. So, I mean, I believe that leadership, leading an organization, starts at the top and it trickles down. How do you translate that to your workforce? And then maybe how do you think we could translate that across our industry?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, especially for a company like ULA. You know, we were originally formed to solve a crisis. And that crisis was that our country had put up really all of its space assets at once. This isn't something we did on purpose, but we've fallen into that pattern. The wave goes up, they all age out, they all die at about the same time, we replace them all again. We were heading towards the end of that. The replacement systems were all late. There were going to be gaps in capability. Lives would be at risk, overseas and as well as here.
Oh, I know.
And so our job at that time was to be able to launch any payload to any orbit, never be late. Don't care what satellite shows up in what order, because if it shows up to the pad, we're going to put it on a rocket and take it to space, and don't lose any. At that time, and still today, the industry norm is to lose about 1 launch in 10. So that was the mission we did, and we've done 118 in a row. We've never lost one. This is a different time. Now we are caught up. The crisis is over. The industry has matured around us, and we have new entrants, which is a marvelous thing. Competition is so healthy for the industry, it's good for the government. And we are able now to do this audacious goal I just described and to really change the whole environment. But I have a team whose mission was, these are billion-dollar satellites, they are one of a kind, lives depend on them, do not screw up, get it to space. And so to shift that to a more, sort of entrepreneurial posture, you have to have giant goals that require the shattering of prior limitations, that require true innovation in order to achieve them and create that burning platform to drive your team through it. You have to be courageous because you're going to take risks. You have to be patient because you have to nurture innovation. And you have to understand that it's not about one guy with one great idea. It's about a lot of people with a lot of ideas so that in there someplace will be that killer app, that killer idea. And you got to be stubborn. You got to not back down.
I have that quality.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. So you can't just sort of, against all that pressure and headwind, sort of retreat back to, to mediocrity, to business as usual. You really got to continue to push. And taking risk isn't something that we just sort of throw off the cuff. A lot of people talk about, oh, just take risks and allow failure. And that actually is part of it. That's not all of it.
Right.
You have to think about risks.
Calculated.
You have to look at this great idea that someone has brought you in response to that tremendous challenge you issued them and say, all right, what will be the benefit if this works out? Wow, that's really exciting. All right, what's the worst thing that can happen if it goes wrong? Sometimes that is not sustainable and cannot be mitigated, and you pass on that one. But other times it's like, well, that's not so bad. So you have to make those choices and really weigh those. And the other thing is the whole team has to be engaged in this. They have to understand the strategy. It's kind of a funny phenomenon in large companies especially, that you come up with your strategy and it's so competition sensitive that you got to lock it down and keep it a secret. And every place I've been, that conversation happens. And I always think about the movie Dr. Strangelove. Anybody seen it?
Oh, yes.
Can you think of the scene I'm thinking of? Where the actor says, so let me get this straight. You've developed an inevitable doomsday mission, or weapon rather, to deter anybody from attacking you, but you didn't tell anyone. That's kind of like a strategy that you keep secret.
So before we sort of do we've got about 7 minutes left, but I have some questions that have come in. Tory, you have a great sort of video for us at the end, but I'd like to go ahead and address some of the questions, if that's okay, that some of the people have. For Dr. Sinclair, would this technology be for mainstream use as well?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. That's why we're doing it in the first place. The goal is to really change medical care, lifespan, and also what we call health span in the 21st century. And if we succeed, my colleagues and I, we believe that it's going to be as important as the development of antibiotics. And people 30 years from now will wonder, why didn't we work on this earlier? But yeah, absolutely. And what's great about working with NASA is it's a win-win. We are now working on protecting animals and eventually people from radiation damage. But that's also applicable to people getting CT scans, X-rays every day, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. And broadly, one day it may be that tens of millions of people take these pills after the age of 40 or 50.
So this next question is my same question that I've been asking you all along. How expensive is it, and when can you sign me up?
Oh, seriously?
Yes, that is the question. Again,
the first one is easier. The first one is, so we're on a pharmaceutical development program. It's been argued that some of the molecules that we have are naturally occurring. We do have hundreds of molecules that are also proprietary and synthetic. We have a big group of chemists working on that. But we've decided, instead of going down the supplement route, we want to know as soon as possible if it's safe and effective. And we're going to do that through FDA sanctioned and approved clinical trials. And so we're going to have to wait another few years for this to come on the market. Unfortunately, those are regulations. You know, everyone here knows what regulations are like. But they're important because they do protect people. And you know when you're going to take this pill that it's going to do something and you're not risking your life. Some of us have tried the pill. Those people, including myself, are still alive.
Never heard of a scientist trying their own experiment.
But just having an experiment on a few people isn't proof. And we hope over the next year or two we will have the first signs that this is actually working in people. And in terms of signing you up, I'll have to remove this microphone first.
Okay, so Marilyn, I have a couple questions for you. What's the process of producing the anti-biofilm?
So the chemicals themselves are very expensive to make synthetically in a natural way through what's called biosynthesis, where you're fermenting these marine microbes and then extracting milligrams of the powder. But this, you know, this cost us $25,000 to make the first time. It's one of the novel chemicals. It was done by a team of people, chemists who know how to do this for the first time. It's so simple to make. It's only 4 steps in the lab. If you're a chemist, believe me, that's very inexpensive. So now that we have it and it's all testing out, it will be put at scale, at commercial scale, and we're expecting something like under $50 a kilo. So it should be very inexpensive to incorporate into sprays, washes, pastes, gels, coatings, and paints and materials for use to control bacteria. But as we said, the antimicrobial resistant bugs are already killing 700,000 people a year. So it's a pressing problem that we think we can solve rather quickly.
Okay, well, so what I'd like to do is the rest of the questions that we have, we'll make sure we get them to the panel members, but I have a question for you, Tory.
Yes.
You said you have 100 people or organizations that you've pulled together. Mm-hmm. Does that include some of the contractors, NASA?
Yes, yes it does, actually.
Investors? Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yes, we are already in
because that was going to be my next. That was going to be my next task for him, was to pull together all the contractors. And so, any just sort of one sentence from each of you, just moving forward with any government agencies doing this. What would you advise, or innovators? And we'll just start down at the end, and we'll move down. Riccardo.
Yep. Well. I always say that the first round of NASA iTech was great, but every time you start an initiative, the bar and the expectation are higher, and so it will be important to keep up the great job. What NASA iTech really is technical, it's called a foundry, so it's a great accelerator incubator for startup, and I think this will have a great future.
Jose.
So on this, I'll share a quick note of morning of the second day I was there. Mr. Anderson brings up and talks about what else could we do. One of the questions I brought up to him, can we decentralize this? So as Caelus, we saw a vision where every one of the centers could do something to this effect, where their requirement in a particular entrepreneur is there, and local investors could provide opportunities to help work, consult, or provide support to a lot of these requirements that you need. So I look forward as this grow, if it can decentralize, how we can get involved at the local level.
Tory.
Only NASA can play the catalyst role that we're seeing here. Your program should absolutely be the model.
Thank you. Peter?
I think this is a perfect example of a public-private partnership where the government, in this case NASA, identifies some of our toughest challenges and tries to rally together all the entrepreneurial spirit we have in the world to help address some of mankind's greatest challenges and greatest opportunities.
David?
Gosh, it's hard to follow that. I think in this room and around the world, we've got some of the greatest minds that are untapped and brilliant guys. who are 22 years old, who set out to change the world but don't know how to do that. With the mentorship from this program and from meeting all of you, I think that the future looks bright, and just the connections alone are super valuable to us.
Marilyn.
Well, our goal is also to save the world, and if we can save the future of mankind in space, that's certainly part of the definition. And without this program, we would be still struggling to move at our snail pace. So this has been a tremendous opportunity for us, and we thank the organizers who are here today. And
Anu?
Yeah, I think being a young company and being able to, work with NASA and sort of break into that, highly regulated sphere of government has been, awesome for us, especially at the pace that iTech has moved compared to a lot of other, sorts of grants. I think iTech should be, seen as a model agency in how these types of things should be done with startups and young companies.
I just want to thank all of my panel members for your time, for being here, and just the great work that you guys are all doing. I mean, I feel very fortunate to actually get to work with some of you guys. So thank you for your time and for, prepping for this and being here today. I appreciate it.
This has been a great panel. Kira needs a round of applause. Yeah.